a very warm welcome to the Analyst dated 13 January 2026, brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi, wherein we'll be covering the 7 set of current affairs issues which have featured in today's newspaper. The handout of this very discussion has been pinned in the comment section below for a future reference. Beginning with the analysis section, in the first topic, we'll be looking into this debate that should country allow inequality to rise in order to increase their GDP size, or should they be guided by the idea of inclusive growth? Moving on to the second topic, as CAG has pointed out various irregularities with respect to Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. So in this particular respect, we'll try and understand the challenges which India is facing when it comes to skilling its youth, as well as what needs to be done in order to effectively reap the benefits of demographic dividend. Moving on to the simplified section, herein we'll be covering the 5 set of current affairs issues in the most simple manner possible, and wherever needed, we'll be doing the value addition from prelims perspective. So stay tuned. Now, beginning with the first topic, wherein we are going to look into this debate that should a particular country allow the inequality to rise in order to increase its GDP size, or should the country be guided by the idea of inclusive growth? This particular topic we can associate with GS paper 3, wherein you have specifically mentioned topic, that is inclusive growth. Now, why are we discussing this particular debate? Because today in Indian Express a write-up has appeared in this particular respect, wherein the writer is making a point that equality is not the enemy of growth. Now, you must be wondering that why we are saying that equality isn't the enemy of growth, and why ma'am is saying that whether the state should allow the inequality to rise in order to increase the GDP size. For this, you need to understand what is the Kuznets inequality curve. So, when it comes to Kuznets inequality curve, herein we have the income inequality, Gini coefficient, and herein we have the GDP per capita. So, what this Kuznets curve actually tells us, that in the initial phases of growth, the country should allow the inequality to rise. And why Kuznets is saying this particular thing? According to Kuznets, if you allow the inequality to rise, what would happen? The richer segment would be able to accumulate more and more wealth. When the richer segment would be having higher wealth, they would be using this wealth for what purpose? For doing investment. And this investment would ultimately do 2 things. It would increase the jobs and it would increase the GDP. This is the reason why we are saying that should country allow the inequality to rise in order to increase their GDP size or not. But according to the Kuznets curve, after a particular turning point, because of this trickle down mechanism, what I have explained to you, this is trickle down mechanism only. Initially inequality would rise, the richer segment would accumulate more and more wealth, they will be doing investment, that would lead to creation of jobs, which would ultimately be benefiting the downtrodden section of a particular society. Okay, this is the trickle down mechanism. That's how the growth, the fruits of growth actually reaches to the downtrodden sections also. So, after a turning point, the inequality would decrease. But in practical sense, in none of the country, we have seen this thing happening. That is the reason nowadays we are guided by the idea of inclusive growth. And that is the reason the person who has written this particular editorial, he is making a point that equality isn't the enemy of growth. Let's try and understand what all arguments the writer has given. So, the first and the prominent argument which the writer makes here is, in unequal societies, what do you see? The state do not invest heavily in the public goods like health, education, sanitation, etc., which are needed for capital formation, human capital formation. And ultimately, when the state invests in these public goods, only then you see a reduction in poverty levels. So, if you want to reduce the poverty levels, you need to invest in the public goods. And that's how you need to address the inequality situation. Second and the most prominent argument which the writer makes here is that if the inequality is high, ultimately the consumption is going to get impacted. On what basis we are making this argument? In economics, you must have read about this term called marginal propensity to consume, which actually tells us that if my income is increasing, how much my consumption is going to increase. And what we have seen generally is that the marginal propensity to consume of richer segment is less than the marginal propensity to consume of the poor. So what is going to happen? If inequality is going to rise, poor people would be having less amount of money. And ultimately, if they have less amount of money, this is going to negatively impact your aggregate demand. So when the demand goes down, in the last analyst also I've told you that when it comes to Indian economy, we are a consumption-led economy. So when it comes to private final consumption expenditure, since it accounts for 60% of the GDP, if the aggregate demand goes down, ultimately your GDP would also come down. And there's another mechanism for this. When do you think the entrepreneurs are going to make the investment? When they are assured of this fact that there is a stable demand for the product that I'm producing. But imagine in this scenario, when the inequality is quite high, obviously the people, the poor segment, who is actually known for, consumption, increasing the consumption demand, they are not demanding any good. So ultimately, do you think the entrepreneur would be interested to make the investment? The answer is no. So because of these two things, first, your aggregate demand goes down, and because the aggregate demand is going down, the entrepreneurs would not be incentivized to do the investment. Because of these two things, what happens? Your GDP would also come down. That is the reason the writer is making a very strong argument that equality isn't the enemy of growth. Rather, if you promote equality, you will be having higher private final consumption expenditure. This would in turn give a boost to investment and ultimately to your GDP as well. Then another prominent argument which the writer is making is with respect to the pool of potential entrepreneurs. In a highly unequal society, what would happen? Only those people can become businessmen who have the accumulated wealth, okay, the wealth which was accumulated by their parents or grandparents. Even a person who belong to a poor segment, who might be having the entrepreneurial skill, that how, a business could be expanded. But just because that person do not have the wealth, that person would not be able to become a businessman. So ultimately, you will be having the entrepreneurs coming from a very narrow social base. And the reverse would be the case when it comes to more equal society. In the more equal society, the person who is also belonging to a poor segment, if they are able to get the loans from the bank at a lower rate, ultimately if that person has the business acumen, that person would be able to increase the business size. And this would be positively impacting to your GDP also. That is why for an economy, you also need a good, pool of entrepreneurs also, because entrepreneurs are going to add to your GDP. This is another argument. And lastly, from society point of view and from ethical point of view also, the writer is saying that the state has this moral obligation that they reduce the inequality level. Otherwise, they would be violating the social contract. And this was the reason why the Gen Z started protesting on the streets of Nepal. Because there what happened? The wealth inequality actually started getting reflected in the form of power dynamics also. The wealthier segments were the one who were sitting in the parliaments there, the legislatures there. Alright, so people go and protest on the streets only when they see that this wealth inequality is getting translated into power dynamics, and that is negatively going to undermine their political dignity. So for upholding the social contract theory and to ensure that the state continues to enjoy the social trust and there is social harmony in the society, for that point of view also the state should take the welfare approach and it should reduce the inequality level. Otherwise, if the social trust get eroded, ultimately this would lead to social disharmony, protest on the streets, and this is again going to negatively impact your growth rates. Now, how do you actually calculate inequality? So we have Gini coefficient and Lorentz curve. Now, can you see this blue line? This is actually the line of perfect equality. What do I mean by line of perfect equality? This simply means that if the bottom 25% of a society is getting 25% of the national income, or the bottom 50% is getting 50% of the national income, in that scenario, we'll say that there is perfect equality when it comes to that particular society. But what is going to be the actual distribution of income? That is reflected by your Lorentz curve, this black line. Alright. Now, how do you actually calculate this Gini coefficient? So, the area which is there between this line of perfect equality and the Lorentz curve, this is A and this is B. The Lorentz curve and this graph thing. Now, when will you be having perfect equality? This would be the scenario only when this Lorentz curve actually coincides with this line of perfect equality. In that case, this area A would become 0. So, perfect equality would be the scenario when you have Gini coefficient as 0. The reverse would be the case when we talk about perfect inequality. In this case, your Gini coefficient would be equal to 1. Why? Because this entire area would become A. And what is the formula? A divided by A plus B. Here B would become 0 because your Lorentz curve in this case would be coinciding with this particular graph. This entire area would become A only. So A divided by A, Gini coefficient would be 1. Now, can anybody tell me that what is the Gini coefficient currently when it comes to India? So according to World Bank, the Gini coefficient when it comes to India, it has actually reduced from 28.8 to 5.5. Now, having understood this entire inequality debate, can we say that when it comes to Indian economy, we are following or we are guided by the idea of inclusive growth? Let's understand that. How far we are guided by this idea of inclusive growth. Now, the first thing that you need to understand is what is this inclusive growth? In simple word, it says that when all the segment of the society are not just mere recipients of the fruits of economic growth, rather they are also the contributors. Okay, so when you go by the formal definition given by OECD, inclusive growth actually refers to economic growth which creates opportunity for all segments of the population and distributes the dividends of increased prosperity both in monetary as well as non-monetary terms fairly across the society. Now, coming to this debate when it comes to Indian economy, do you think we are following the inclusive growth trajectory? So, we have certain data points which say yes, and there are certain data points which says that no, we are not, we have not been able to completely realize the idea of inclusive growth. So, firstly, let's look into the data point which says that yes, we are moving in this direction of inclusive growth. So, firstly, we have been able to reduce the multidimensional poverty index. So, if you go by the Niti Aayog data point, we have been able to reduce the people living, with multidimensional poverty, and we have seen a reduction of around 18% between 2013-14 to 22-23. Then we have expanded the financial inclusion, especially under the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. So we have opened around 53 crore accounts and 66% of these accounts are basically in the rural and semi-urban areas. And when it comes to women account holders, they comprise around 55% of the accounts that we have opened under the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. Then we have improved the HDI ranking also. So if you look at India's HDI value, it has increased by over 53% since 1990s. And recently also the HDI which came up, therein also our rank improved. Okay, previously it was 133, currently it is 130 out of 193 countries. Now in the domain of education also, we have improved the scenario. So if you talk about the female gross enrollment ratio to male gross enrollment ratio, especially at the higher education level, we have been able to attain gender parity there. Okay, so that means the female gross enrollment ratio is equal to male gross enrollment ratio. And this has continued to be above 1 since 2017-18 and we have consistently maintained that. When it comes to the children, according to the HDI index of 2025 which was released, now the children are staying in school for a longer time period. Earlier, way back in 1990s, a child used to stay in the school merely till 8.2 years, but now they are staying in the school for 13 years. Then we have also made great advancement when it comes to the area of health also. Here, if you go by the HDI index of 2025, the life expectancy has improved in India. It has become 72 years. And when you talk about the out-of-pocket expenditure as a percentage of total health expenditure, that has also gone down, okay, according to National Health Accounts data provided in 2021-22. So, according to the National Health Accounts, the out-of-pocket expenditure as a percentage of total health expenditure, it has gone down from roughly 63% in 2014-15 to roughly 40% in 21-22. And this has been possible, why? Because the government expenditure on health as a percentage of total health expenditure has witnessed a remarkable improvement. So it has increased from 29% in 2014-15 to around 48% in 21-22. Now, having discussed that, okay, we have made certain great advancement, what are the challenges based on which we say that India has yet not been able to realize the idea of inclusive growth? First and foremost is the rising income and wealth inequality. If you go by the Oxfam report, when it comes to India 2025, the rich 1% is controlling 40% of the wealth. Whereas when you talk about the bottom 50% of the population, they own merely 3% of the wealth. When you look at the income inequality, if you go by the World Inequality Report released recently in 2026, the rich 10% of the India's population, they earn 58% of the national income. And when you talk about the bottom 50%, they are merely receiving 15% of the national income. Okay. Then we also have inequality when it comes to on the basis of gender also. So based on the gender, what we see is the men are earning 82% of the income, whereas female are earning merely 18% of the income. This was again based on the World Inequality Report previously. Then there is huge regional disparity. The southern states contribute more to India's GDP as compared to the Bimaru states like Bihar, UP, etc. Then there is low human capital formation. In this respect, you can quote the World Bank Human Capital Index. What this Human Capital Index actually tells me, that if today a child is born, by the time that child attains the age of 18 years, what percentage of his or her potential that child will be able to realize. So when it comes to the World Bank Human Capital Index released in 2020, at that time India's score was 0.49. That means by the time a child would be attaining the age of 18 years, that child would be able to realize only 59% of his or her human potential. Okay. So that means there is still great scope when it comes to the expenditure done by the government in health and education. That leads to human capital formation. Then when you go by the Global Gender Gap Report 2025, our performance have actually gone down. In 2024, our rank was 129, but our rank has actually deteriorated in 2025. It has gone down to 131. Okay, and this is merely because of poor political participation. And this was also highlighted by the HDI index also last year. Why? Because globally, 27% of the females are parliamentarians. Okay, they hold the position of lawmakers, but when it comes to India, the political participation of women is merely 13 to 14%. Although we have, come up with the Women Reservation Act, wherein we have reserved 1/3 of the seats in the Lok Sabha as well as the State Legislative Assembly, but it has yet not been implemented. Okay, it would be implemented after once the delimitation exercise is done. Then when it comes to India, we are witnessing jobless growth. When it comes to the PIB data, I saw recently, they have stated that when it comes to employment elasticity with respect to India, it is 1.11. Employment elasticity basically tells me that if my GDP is increasing by 1%, what is the resultant change in the employment? Okay, so according to the PIB, this is good. 1% increase in GDP is actually leading to 1.11% increase in employment. But the problem is, what kind of jobs you are creating? You are actually creating informal jobs. 90% of our workforce is still employed in the informal sector. And when you look at the job quality, basically we are creating jobs in the gig economy, okay, which is guided by informalized workforce. So that is another problem. But various economists basically say that employment elasticity is merely 0.1. So ultimately in the exam, you will be quoting PIB data, but you can talk with respect to the quality of jobs being created. We are creating more informal jobs, okay, not formal jobs, which are characterized by high pay and high productivity. Now, having understood this India's growth story, that why we are not able to realize this idea of inclusive growth, what do you think needs to be done? So when you talk about the inequality thing, to address this, the government should be guided by the new welfare approach. Okay, so basically the government should universalize the basic services like water, sanitation, etc. And the government should increase the expenditure on education to around 6.5% of the GDP, and when it comes to health, it should be 4% of the GDP by the time we reach to the Amrit Kal, okay, by financial year 2048. Then when it comes to the regional disparity, here we should be guided by cooperative and competitive federalism. So the states which are not performing well, they should learn from other states. The best practices should be emulated. Then when you talk about the human capital formation, we have already discussed that, okay, this needs to be done. The government should increase its expenditure. When you talk about the women, How do you think we can improve their participation in the labor force? So for this, you can talk about the ILO's 5R approach. What is this 5R approach? First R is recognize the unpaid care work done by the woman. And for this, what you need to do? You need to carry out the time use survey on a regular basis, and you should incorporate that in the GDP. Then after recognize, what you need to do? You need to reduce their burden. And how do you do that? Through universalization of the basic services. For example, under the Jal Jeevan mission, if I am providing tap water, that would be reducing the time poverty of women. She would not have to travel long distance to fetch water for her family. Okay, so that's how you reduce the burden of unpaid care burden work. Then what you have to do? You have to redistribute this burden. And how do you do that? By investing in the care economy. Okay, so you need to come up with the crèche facility, child care homes, old age homes, etc. And in this, the NGO should also come forward. So third R is redistribute. Fourth R is reward them. And how do you do that? By giving them direct benefit transfer. When we give them direct benefit transfer, they can use that money to hire the domestic help for doing the care work. This would help us meet two objectives. First, it would help us monetize the care economy, because the domestic help would now be getting the money for the care work, and this would also help us increase the female labor force participation rate. And last R is ensure their adequate representation in the workforce. And how do you do that? By effective implementation of Maternity Benefit Act and by addressing the gender pay gap that we have currently in India. Okay, this is with respect to women. Then what you need to do in order to address this jobless growth? For this, as the Dalwai panel has pointed out, you need to promote secondary agriculture. What is this secondary agriculture? Secondary agriculture basically refers to two segments. One, which provides inputs to the agriculture. So, SHG providing credit, companies providing seeds, fertilizers. And the one which actually uses the agriculture product as an input, basically your food processing industries. So we need to boost the secondary agriculture in order to create more and more jobs, especially in the rural areas. Then another recommendation that you can talk about is, see, when it comes to Indian economy, why do you think we are witnessing jobless growth? It is because we are witnessing the phenomena of missing middle when it comes to manufacturing. So we have a kind of duality in the manufacturing sector. Either you have very small firms or you have the big firms. The mid-sized firms are absent in the Indian economy. And why do you think it is the scenario? Because the incentives provided by the government for the, the smaller firms, that is not incentivizing them to grow bigger. Rather, they think that if they grow bigger, then they have to follow the labor laws, then they would lose out all these incentives. So, in order to address this phenomenon of missing middle, what you need to do? You need to incentivize only the infant firms. That means the incentive should be provided for initial 5 to 7 years. And then it should be done away with, so that the small firms have this incentive that they should grow bigger in size over a period of time. And then we need to monetize the care economy, and how you can do that? You can talk about the ILO 5R approach. And lastly, as suggested by the Baba Kalyani committee, we need to reorient the special economic zones as economic employment enclaves. Basically, the enterprise which is working in the special economic zone, they should be provided with the incentives based on how many jobs they are creating. Okay, these are the way forward that you can write. Now, UPSC has asked a question on the similar lines, the way we discussed, and I have also framed a practice question for you people. So based on the discussion, please try and attempt this particular question. With this, let's move on to the next topic. Now, the second topic is related to skilling the workforce. This particular topic you can associate with GS paper 3, issues related to employment in India. What is the context? So last year, CAG has pointed out various irregularities when it comes to implementation of Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. So in this particular backdrop, the opposition political parties are now making a fair demand that an impartial investigation into these irregularities should be carried out. Now, let's just first understand various pointers with respect to this particular Yojana, because it could be relevant from your prelims perspective. So this particular scheme was launched way back in 2015, and this is being implemented by Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. Okay, this comes under this particular ministry. Objective, as the name itself suggests, that we have to provide skill training, short-term skill training. Herein we are focusing upon upskilling and reskilling, and one of the distinctive feature of this particular Yojana was recognition of prior learning. Let's understand this, that what does this recognition of prior learning actually implies. See, you must have seen people, if you have booked any repairing services from Urban Clap. Okay, so now Urban Clap, whatever people you are hiring, for providing, let's suppose, repairing of the AC or repairing of your water purifiers, they have the certificates that, okay, they have the expertise. But imagine the people who are working in informal settings. By working in the informal settings, they have acquired the skill, but they don't have any certificate to show this, that they hone this particular skill. So what we are doing under this particular Yojana, we are recognizing whatever prior learning they might have done, okay, which they might have acquired when they were working in the informal setting. And why we are doing this? To enhance their employability potential. Because if they can show that, okay, I have this particular skill set, this would enhance the chances of they getting employed, okay, which was not previously the case. So this is one of the distinctive feature when it comes to this Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. So first phase was launched on a pilot basis way back in 2015-16. Then we started the second phase and it continued from 2016 to 20. Then in the third phase, we came up with two special programs. One was customized cash course program for COVID warriors, basically to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. And then we came up with the Skill Hub initiative, wherein we are trying to mainstream and integrate the vocational training with the school education. Then when it comes to the fourth phase, herein we started focusing upon the new age skill set which are demanded by Industry 4.0. Okay, so we are focusing upon your augmented reality, virtual reality, climate change, circular economy, green economy, whatever skill set is demanded by these sectors. And this was highlighted by the PIB, that this is the achievement of Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, that since 2015 we have provided training to roughly 1.6 crore youth, which is around 45% of the candidates, wherein 45% of your candidates are basically women. But last year, CAG has pointed out various irregularities when it comes to Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. So the Comptroller and Auditor General of India pointed out that various beneficiaries under this particular scheme are using the same bank account number, and it is very absurd bank number, as you can see, 111111. Okay, then same photograph is used for multiple beneficiaries. As you can see in this particular slide itself, the same photograph, we are showing that they are enrolled in different batches, and see, one is in UP, one is in Bihar. Okay, then payouts are pending to around 34 lakh candidates. Under this Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, once a person complete the training, they are provided with one-time monetary reward. And this is the reward we are talking about, that this is pending with respect to 34 lakh candidates. Then majority of the training centers are not operational. Okay, some of the training sector, centers, what the CAG has pointed out was with respect to Bihar. So these were the irregularities pointed out by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Now, in response, the government has stated that when it comes to your bank account number, we have done away with this bank account number way back in May 2023, because getting the bank account number was creating issues at the ground level implementation. So what change we did? We would be providing whatever disbursement has to be provided to the candidate on the basis of Aadhaar seeding, which supports payouts directly to the bank account which is linked with that Aadhaar number. Alright. And then various other changes were introduced by the government using the advanced technology. For example, we went with face authentication technology, geotagged attendance, live attendance dashboard, central communication layer based candidate feedback mechanism, so that we can know from the candidates at how we can further improve the, the particular program. Then QR coded digital certificates, so that nobody is able to come up with false certificates. Large scale virtual and physical inspections, and this would be carried out by Kaushal Samiksha Kendra. Then a penalty framework was also defined by the government, that if the training centers are not following the guidelines, then strong disciplinary action would be taken against them, for example suspension and blacklisting. Now, having understood that what were the discrepancies with respect to this particular Yojana, let's understand that why from economic point of view it becomes all the more important for India to skill the workforce. Now, for this, you need to first understand that what is the present status. So, if you go by the India Skill Report, merely 4% of India's workforce is formally skilled. And if you compare it with China, 47% of the youth, and when it comes to South Korea, 96% of their workforce is formally skilled. Now, why I am using this word formally skilled? If you are formally skilled, this enhances your employability potential. Okay, this is the reason when it comes to India, we say that nearly 51% of the graduates are employable, as highlighted by the economic survey of 23-24. Okay, so there's a need to provide formal skill training to the individuals. Only then they would be ready for the skill set demanded by the industry 4.0. So why there's a need for skilling? First and foremost, to reap the demographic dividend window, because it is going to close after 2040. So if you want to reap this, you need to train your youth. Then we know this is the AI era, and if you don't upskill or reskill your workforce, ultimately they'll be losing the jobs because of the AI. Especially the repetitive tasks would be taken by AI. So you need to provide advanced skill set to your workforce and make sure that your workforce is future ready. Then, in order to reduce disguised unemployment which is prevailing in agriculture, because previously when you talk about agriculture, 45% of our workforce was dependent upon agriculture, but after COVID-19 pandemic, it has increased to 46%. So more people are dependent upon agriculture. So if you want to get those people out from agriculture and you want to provide them adequate, well-paid job in the manufacturing sector, you need to provide them with adequate skill training. Then we need to capitalize upon genes. Now, according to economists, there are different ways to escape the poverty trap. One way is capitalizing upon the genes, okay, basically your demographic dividend. And for this, you know that when it comes to manufacturing and services, which have the higher employment elasticity? Obviously, the manufacturing. Services sector may only the people who are well skilled, only they are able to get the jobs. But when it comes to the semi-skilled or very, poorly skilled youth, they can be absorbed in the manufacturing sector. So, manufacturing sector needs to be improved, okay. For that also, we need to provide the necessary skill set to our youth. And this is needed to basically prevent the middle income trap. Because last year, World Bank in its World Development Report has pointed out that India might not be able to escape the middle income trap, okay. So, if you want to escape this middle income trap, you need to ensure that your youth is adequately skilled, they are able to get the jobs. When they get the job, they'll be increasing the consumption, and that's how your GDP would increase and you will be able to escape the middle income trap. Now, what all various schemes we have come up with when it comes to skilling the youth? We have the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, we have various apprenticeship program, we have PM internship program wherein we are incentivizing the youth to go and get and do the internship in top 500 companies when it comes to India. We have Jan Shikshan Sansthan wherein we are focusing upon the less literate individuals and we are providing them necessary skill set so that they could also get employed. Then we have PM Vishwakarma scheme wherein we are providing and doing the skill development when it comes to artisans. Then we have National Rural Livelihood Mission wherein we are focusing upon skilling the rural youth. Okay, and last year budget we have the skill loan scheme wherein you can get the loan at a subsidized interest rate and use it for the skilling purpose. Okay, but despite all these initiatives which the government has taken, we still have nearly 4% of the workforce formally skilled. Why do you think this is so? We have a lot of schemes, but then also nearly 4% of the people are getting formally skilled. The reason being, there is low demand for the skills. So pay attention to me. This is because of various factors that in India, it's not like we are not supplying the skills. There is very low demand for the skill. First reason is there is poor perception when it comes to skill training. They think that even if you get the skill is not that much relevant. And after getting the skill set also, you will not be getting employed. So there is poor perception when it comes to skill training. Second problem is in the skill training centers, we are providing the skill training for full-time basis. So you need to understand when it comes to skilling, who needs the skilling program more? The people who belong to poor and vulnerable section, and they also have to sustain their families. So if the skill program is on a full-time basis, how they are going to support their families? That is another problem. Okay, another problem is with respect to the skill set that we are providing. That is not up to the mark. That is not being demanded by Industry 4.0. Then another problem is with respect to quantity of training infrastructure that we have. As outlined by the India Skill Report, we need to train on an annual basis roughly 12 million people, but because of the constraint in the infrastructure, we are able to train or provide the skill set only to 8 million youth. Then there is issue with quality of training, and this is because of lack of industry academia linkage. The training centers which are there in India, they are not providing the skill set demanded by Industry 4.0, like for example computer literacy, training them in augmented and virtual reality. Okay, we are providing them those skill set which are not needed by Industry 4.0, and that is the reason that we have low employability of the graduates, because the skill set that is being provided is not at all demanded by Industry 4.0. And another problem is low penetration of the apprenticeship. What is apprenticeship? Wherein you work as an intern with the company. For a short period of time, you will be provided with theoretical education, and then right after that, you will be getting practical experience through on-job training. This is beneficial for the companies also, because they can get good talent pool at a lower rate, because interns are paid less as compared to full-time employees. And for you, okay, if you are as an intern, working as intern, this is beneficial for you. Why? Because you are getting that skill set which is actually demanded by the industry. Okay, so this increases your chances of employability. There are high chances that you will be becoming a regular employee. But the problem is when it comes to internship also, here also we have issues. Merely 7.5 lakh out of the India's total workforce of over 500 million are working as interns. Okay, one more reason why when it comes to India we have poor demand for skilling is because of the availability and the dominance of informal sector. I told you that in the training centers we are only providing full-time training. So it becomes very difficult for a person belonging to poor family to do this full-time training. And it is easier for that person to get the employment in the informal sector. So this is another reason why we have low demand for skilling. So what needs to be done? How we can improve the situation? First and foremost, you need to integrate vocational education as a part of school education. This is being done in the state of Maharashtra. Okay, so this needs to be emulated in other states also, especially from class 11th and 12th. This should be done. Then you should offer short-term training courses. This would incentivize the people belonging to poor segment to come and do the skill training. Then we need to enhance the quantity of training centers. How we can do that? So if you go for the short-term training courses or part-time training courses, then what we can do, once the school and colleges get over, we can use the government school and colleges for working as training centers. And in this respect, the other states should also learn from Delhi, wherein we are using mobile vans to do the skilling thing. So this is referred as skill on the wheels. This is something which we have done in Delhi. This needs to be replicated in other states as well. And we can also incentivize the private sector to come and build the requisite training centers. This would be helping them to get the necessary talent pool also. Then how we can enhance the quality of training? For this, you need to improve the industry academia linkage. So the industry should tell that what skill set I need, and accordingly there should be updation, necessary updation should be there in the training courses. And lastly, how we can capitalize on the apprenticeship. From this, in this case we can learn from German. In case of Germany, we have dual education system. So in the morning, you will be doing your classes, you will be learning the theoretical part, and in the evening, once you are done with the college, you will be doing the internship in the nearby companies. Okay, so this, what happens because of this, the companies are able to get the interns, and when you are doing internship along with the college, the moment you complete the college, you get employed. Okay, so this is something that we need to replicate in case of India as well. That's all with respect to this particular topic. Based on the discussion that we have, I have framed a practice question for you people. So do practice this. And with this, let's move on to the simplified section. Now, recently, an article has appeared in The Hindu which talks about the relevance of Article 6 of Paris Agreement in terms of India. This particular topic you can associate with the prelims syllabus, especially the environment portion. Now, before we look into what the article has to say, let's just understand what is this Article 6 of Paris Agreement all about. So, when it comes to this Article 6, it is basically giving force to the climate finance. Okay, we are allowing the trading of carbon credits. Under this, we have Article 6.2. So, when it comes to trading of carbon credit between different countries, which is being done under Article 6.2, this would be done on voluntary basis. So, let's suppose here we have India and here we have Bhutan, which is a carbon negative country. So, Bhutan is able to meet its nationally determined contribution, and it is reducing the CO2 emission beyond that. So it is earning carbon credits, and let's suppose India is not able to reduce the CO2 emissions. So what it would tell to Bhutan, that you sell me these carbon credit. Okay, and how the selling would be happening based on the agreement between India and Bhutan, and in return what Bhutan would be getting, it would be getting the money in return, and this would help India to meet its NDCs. Now under the 6.2 only, we have the joint credit mechanism. Currently India has signed the joint credit mechanism with Japan. So what happens here, when it comes to Japan, it is not able to, let's suppose, reduce the CO2 emission. So what it would tell India, see, I am transferring you the technology, I am giving you the finance, you build some clean energy project in any state, and whatever carbon credit would be generated because of that, because when we create clean energy projects, the CO2 emission would go down, and that would lead to creation of carbon credits. Japan would say that you need to transfer these carbon credits to me so that I am able to meet my nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement. Alright, you need to understand this, that whatever trading of carbon credits is taking place under this 6.2, this is based on whatever is the agreement between the two countries. But when I talk about the trading of carbon credits done under Article 6.4, this would be done based on a standardized format which would be put in place by the UNFCCC supervised body. Supervisory body would be created, and that body would be creating a standardized format. In 6.2, the countries could decide that how and on what basis they will be doing the trading of carbon credit, but here a supervisory body which would be created by UNFCCC, that would be regulating the trading of carbon credits. When you talk about Article 6.8, herein we are following the non-market approaches. Why I am saying non-market approaches? Because here one country would be providing the finance, the technology, etc. But here no trading of carbon credits would take place. Okay, so on philanthropic basis, one country might be helping another country. Now, when it comes to the Conference of Party 29, which took place in Baku, Azerbaijan, therein we formulated all the rules and we gave effect to this Article 6 of Paris Agreement. So that is the reason the COP29 is also referred to be as the Climate Finance Conference of Parties. Okay, so according to this particular article, this is going to benefit India. Now the joint credit mechanism that I discussed, that is more or less similar to clean development mechanism that we had under the Kyoto Protocol. Here the only difference is the developed economies would be providing the finance. They would not be doing any technology transfer. They will be giving the finance to the developing economies or least developed countries, and whatever carbon credits would be created because of the creation of clean energy projects, that would be transferred to the developed economies so that they can meet their NDCs. Alright, so this article is pointing out that the recent signing of joint credit mechanism between India and Japan is going to help India. Okay, because it would enable us to get the advanced technology, it would strengthen our bilateral relation, it would support R&D, and this would also help us to get the much needed climate finance. This would also help us to do the socio-economic transformation, because if we are building more and more clean energy projects, ultimately the impact of climate change would be less, especially on the poor and vulnerable sections. Okay, so article is pointing out that the real prize lies in using this mechanism to accelerate a low carbon industrial and technological transformation. Now I told you India and Japan has signed a joint credit mechanism, and according to the article, this is going to operationalize both Article 6.2 and 6.4. The Indian government has already strategically identified a set of 13 eligible activities under this. So these are the activities that we have outlined. Now the article is pointing out that India needs to move from intent to action. And how do you do that? First of all, you need to strengthen the domestic framework. Already India has appointed a designated national authority to give effect to this Article 6. But the problem is the government has yet not, listed down the details with respect to what is the scope of activities that has to be performed by this particular authority. And we have yet not established a stable legal and regulatory framework when it comes to carbon trading. Okay, so this needs to be done. Just merely creation of the authority would not work. Then We need to streamline the project clearances. So for this, the article has suggested that we need to set up a steering committee at the cabinet level, which would be offering the broader guidelines when it comes to taking the regular stock. Okay, so any such agreement which is going to take place between India and another country, the clearance should be done by the steering committee. So single window clearance should be there. And then we need to build and strengthen the removal market. Basically, the article is basically talking about, realizing the potential of biochar. So biochar, recent, updates have tell us that biochar is basically a carbon sink, because it can hold the carbon in the soil for 100 to 1000 years. So if we capitalize on biochar, this could enable India to become a supplier of high quality removal credits. So we'll be able to generate more and more carbon credits. Okay. And we need to strengthen the South-South collaboration. So India should take a lead in this respect. That is what the article is basically telling. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, sadly, the PSLV C62 mission has failed. This particular topic you can associate with the science and tech portion of your prelim syllabus. Now, this PSLV C62 mission was carrying 16 satellites and 7 were from the foreign countries. This is the second straight failure of this PSLV rocket, which has served the ISROs for 3 decades. Last year, we also saw the failure of the third stage in May 2025. On both the occasions, like in May last year also and this PSLV C62 mission also, the rocket took off successfully, completed the first 2 stages, but developed certain complexity during the third stage. Why there is so much complexity when it comes to the third stage? Because this is the most critical stage when the rocket need to rapidly accelerate and it has to increase the velocity to a greater extent so that it can orbit the Earth. Okay, you need higher velocity, otherwise the rocket would be attracted by the Earth's gravity. Okay, so it needs to have necessary acceleration. Now let's just understand the different stages of this PSLV rocket. So it is a 4-stage rocket, that is Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, and here the stages basically refer to the different parts of rocket. Each of them have their own engines and their fuel. And as and when the one stage get completed, that part get detached from the rocket. So when you talk about the first stage, this is the lift off stage. So it would be doing a vertical journey like this and it would take the rocket to an altitude of 50-60 km. Okay, so this much energy is needed when the rocket has to lift off. It needs higher energy, only then it would be able to escape the Earth's gravity as well as the atmospheric drag. It also has to, resist that also. So that is the reason at the first stage we use solid propellant as fuel. And once the first stage get completed, the rocket, weight become less. Okay, because the first stage constitute the bulk of the weight of the particular rocket. Okay, so after the fuel is spent, the part of the rocket becomes dead weight and it gets detached from the main rocket. Then comes the second stage, wherein the rocket continues to move vertically like this and it would start moving horizontally at the same time so that it can get into the orbit. This is something that it has to do in the third stage. Here we use the liquid fuel, okay, that is the indigenously developed Vikas engine. Here the rocket would reach to this level, approximately 250 km from Earth's surface. And the time the second stage gets separated, the weight of the mission falls to around 10 to 20% of the launch weight. Okay, and the vehicle attains a high speed of around 14,000 km an hour. Now comes the third stage and the most critical stage, because here the vehicle is moving entirely horizontally and it is moving around the Earth in an orbit. Now, when the rocket is moving in an orbit around the Earth, it needs higher power. Okay, it needs to reach a high velocity to around 28,000 km per hour. And if it fails to meet this trajectory, then what would happen? It would fall towards the Earth. And at time, what happens? And this is something that happened in May last year. At the third stage, the rocket was not able to attain this much velocity. Okay, rapid acceleration is needed. So when it comes to this stage, since huge power is needed, so here again we use solid fuel to achieve this. In the first stage, we use solid fuel, second phase liquid fuel, third phase again solid fuel. And the vehicle begins to go around the Earth at a very high speed but does not yet reach its designated orbit. Okay, we place the satellite in an orbit around the Earth. This is to be done in the 4th stage, not in the 3rd stage. Okay, in the 3rd stage, it just has to maintain that velocity so that it can orbit the Earth. And when it comes to the 4th stage, herein the last stage happens when the satellite is actually put in an orbit around the Earth. And when you talk about putting the satellite at a lower Earth orbit, it is less than 2000 km. And at the 4th stage, again we use liquid propulsion. Now, why this 3rd stage is tricky? Because if the rocket fails to attain that required velocity, okay, then it would be unable to maintain the orbit around the Earth and it would get pulled down due to the gravity. And this is what happened in the last mission that we had. Now, how this stage actually works, as I told you, here we use in the 3rd stage we use solid fuel. It gets converted into the gas, and this gas increase the pressure in the combustion chamber. That's how we are able to accelerate the speed. Now, the gas is then released through a small nozzle to provide the thrust required so that the rocket is able to attain that higher speed. But if there is any leak, then the pressure would drop when it comes to the combustion chamber, and this is what happened last year also. Okay, last year ISRO told us that this was some kind of a manufacturing defect, and that is the reason the gas leaked out. Now, why this is a cause of concern for ISRO? Because back-to-back failures diminish the trust that we as citizens have in ISRO, and the foreign companies, if they want to launch rocket from using this PSLV rocket. So that is also another concern, because PSLV has been a major revenue earner for ISRO and it has been used for various launches. So it is, yes, a major setback, but we know ISRO is all known for bouncing back from this crisis. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, the International Court of Justice has decided that it would be looking into this case of Rohingya genocide case. This particular topic you can associate with the PRIM segment, basically international organization. So the case was basically filed before the ICJ by the Gambia, and they pointed out that Myanmar has basically violated the 1948 Genocide Convention. And due to this genocide, the Rohingya basically have to escape to the neighboring countries like Bangladesh, and they are basically residing in this area, Cox's Bazar area in Bangladesh. Okay, and they are also subjected to rape, arson and murder. Now, let's just understand from a prelims perspective certain pointers with respect to International Court of Justice. So, it is also known as the World Court, and it was established way back in 1945 by the UN Charter. It is a principal judicial organ of UN, and it has but it is independent of the UN Secretariat. It is a judicial organ of UN, but it has, it is independent of the UN Secretariat. It is headquartered in Hague, Netherlands, and this is the pointer which is important from preliminary perspective. Out of the 6 principal UN organs, this ICJ is the only UN body which is not located in New York. You need to let me know in the comment section which are the other 5 principal UN organs. Okay, when you talk about the official language of ICJ, it is English and French. The member states of UN automatically become party to this particular court, and if a member who is not, a state who is not a member of UN, then if that state wants to become a member of ICJ, then they can also do that by ratifying the ICJ statute. Now, when you talk about this International Court of Justice, we have 15 judges in total, and they are elected for a term of 9 years. It does not include more than 1 judge of any nationality to ensure that there is diverse representation. And the member of court, the judges, they are not representing their respective countries. Okay, they act in an independent manner. They are not there to protect the interest of their particular country. Okay. When it comes to manner of election, the elections are held every 3 years, and 1/3 of the seats, basically 5 judges, are elected every year, every 3 years. And how do we do the election? So election, take place simultaneously in the UN General Assembly also and in the UN Security Council also. And the person needs to get absolute majority in both the bodies. And once a person ceases to be a member of this, ICJ, basically a judge has retired, then also the retired judge becomes eligible for re-election. Now, when you talk about the jurisdiction, when it comes to contentious cases, basically the case which is between the 2 states, like the Rohingya genocide case which is there, it needs to be submitted to the ICJ by a state. And only states can be a party to such particular case. And here the court judgment would be final, and there would be no appeal in this case. When it comes to advisory opinion, here the opinion given by the ICJ is not binding, because here the ICJ would be basically looking into the legal questions with respect to functioning of a particular UN body. Okay. Now, when you talk about the limitations of the power of ICJ, it does not have any jurisdiction when you talk about, trying the individual accused of war crimes or crimes against humanity, and it can only take up cases when it is requested by the states. Now, from a prelims perspective, it is very important that you understand the differences between ICJ and International Criminal Court. So, you can just refer to this particular table I have put for your reference. With this, let's move on to the next topic. Now, recently, US has stated that India would be invited to be a part of the Pax Silica initiative. This particular topic you can associate with GS paper 2 international relations. Now, when you talk about the US-led Pax Silica initiative, it has these many members. So, it has other Quad members except India, that is your US, Japan, Australia. It has the I2, U2 countries also, that is your Israel, USA, UAE. Then it has South Korea, Singapore, UK and Netherlands. Last year, when in December, the US, conducted or it launched this Pax Silica initiative, at that time it did not invite India, but other countries were invited. Now, it was launched last year, December 12, and basically the aim is to basically reduce the dependence on China, to reduce coercive dependency basically on China and build a secure, prosperous, innovation-driven silicon supply chain. It would not just be restricted to silicon supply chain, it would be covering various elements like critical minerals, energy inputs, semiconductors, AI, infrastructure, logistic, and these are its member. Okay, except the India, which is a Quad member. Other Quad members, as you can see, USA, Japan and Australia, you will find them. Now, why this Pax Silica initiative is important for India? Because of the US skepticism with respect to China. What is happening? The multinational companies are guided by China plus one strategy. Basically, they are trying to diversify their manufacturing base. They are trying to establish a manufacturing base apart from China. So, here in India can also reap the benefits of this China plus one strategy. And India previously has also raised the concerns over China's involvement in India's critical infrastructure. So, under this Pax Silica initiative, the US has pointed out that it also entails sensitive technology, protecting the sensitive technology and the critical infrastructure, which is in alignment with what India wants. And this would help the India to grow when it comes to technology heavy sectors. When it comes to semiconductor industries, when it comes to semiconductor supply chain, we know that India is merely in the assembly line, not in the designing aspect. So, if India becomes a part of this initiative, we would be getting the much needed technology when it comes to semiconductor and all. And although we are not a part of this initiative, but various US companies have announced that they are going to invest when it comes to AI infrastructure. Okay, and setting up AI data centers. Okay, like last year, Microsoft has made an announcement and Google has also made an announcement. So, when India would become a part of this particular initiative, this would give a much needed thrust to the semiconductor supply chain, electronic supply chain, securing our critical infrastructure, etc. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently, we are witnessing cases of Nipah virus in the state of West Bengal. This particular topic you can associate with the prelim section, basically diseases. Although it has not been confirmed, it is just suspected that 2 of the healthcare workers, they are suspected that they might be infected with this Nipah virus in the state of West Bengal. So, we have started doing contact tracing. Basically, these health workers, they came in contact with how many people, because Nipah virus can be, transferred or it could be transmitted from one person to another person. So, in this respect, state government has launched a helpline number, okay, to provide advisory services to the people. And the state government has pointed out that, we have this concern that it might be Nipah virus, because when you talk about the fruit bats who are the host of this particular virus, they usually, eat the date sap. And during the winters, the people who are residing in West Bengal, they eat this date sap. So, the government has given this advisory that don't have this raw sap, rather boil it, or you have processed jaggery, that is not a problem. And in this respect, the union government has stated that we are all there to help you. So, it has, put in place a national joint outbreak response team. If it is confirmed that it is, Nipah virus case, then the center is, ready to provide a hand-holding support to West Bengal in this respect. Now, from prelims perspective, we need to know certain prelim facts with respect to this particular virus. So, it is caused by RNA virus. RNA virus has the ability to replicate very fast. Okay. It is closely related to Hendra virus, and host of the virus, as I told you, it is this fruit bat, which is commonly known as flying fox also. So, what happens? These flying fox or this fruit bat actually consume the fruits which is eaten by the people. Like in case of West Bengal, the authorities have pointed out that it might be because people have consumed raw sap, okay, date sap. So, when you directly eat the fruits eaten by the infected bat, or what happens, it can be indirectly transferred through the pig also. And then ultimately, the people who come in contact with this particular person who is infected with Nipah virus, other people would also get contaminated with this particular virus. So, transmission through direct contact, contaminated food, close contact with an infected person. The problem with this particular disease is it has a high fertility rate between 40% to 75%. And another problem is no vaccine is there to protect a particular person. Firstly, we saw the outbreak of this particular disease way back in Malaysia in 1998. And in India, we have seen outbreak of this particular virus in West Bengal and in Kerala. Now, what are the symptoms? And you need to understand that these symptoms of this particular virus, they start showing after 4 to 5 days. Once you got infected, after 5 to maybe 14 days, the symptoms would start showing in your body. The symptoms are fever, headache, drowsiness, disorientation, mental confusion, etc. The problem is, as I told you, there is no specific treatment for this particular virus, and we basically rely on intensive supportive care. That's all that we need to know in today's Analyst. Quiz would be coming right up next. So don't forget to practice the quiz and check your knowledge. Till then, keep smiling, keep learning. Have a great day, all of you.